I'm gonna be very honest with you, this is delicious. Today we're going to be making some suya. If you don't know what suya is, it's this delicious West African street food, and one of the key things to make it is this beautiful spice mix, and one of the key ingredients in that spice mix is the peanut or groundnut. There are a couple of methods in which you can include the peanut into the spice mix, so let's go over them. But the one key thing is just making sure that every time you do include the peanut into the spice mix, it's roasted every time. So method number one is just to directly roast the peanuts and blend them with the spice mix. Add some peanuts onto a tray and into a glass, mix water with a few pinches of salt, and then add a few splashes of that solution onto the tray and give everything a good mix. And then put it in a preheated oven on about 180 to 190 degrees Celsius. You'll know it's done when you can kind of just take a peanut, rub it against your fingers, and the skin should just come right off. Or you could just buy some roasted peanuts. Also, do keep in mind when you're blending the peanuts with the other spices, you don't do it for too long because the peanuts will start to release some of their oil and it will start to clump together with the other spices, which you don't want. Method number two, and also the method we're going to be using in this video, we're going to be making a delicious snack called Kuli Kuli, to which we'll also add to the spice mix and blend. To make Kuli Kuli, add those peanuts into a food processor with some salt and sugar and make peanut butter. Or you could just buy peanut butter. Pour it into a mixing bowl and a spoon at a time, add some water and mix. We do this to help draw out the oil from the mixture, which is very important when making Kuli Kuli. I got impatient the first time I did this and I added way too much water. Don't do it, you'll end up with something that looks like this and you can't really do much with that. So just add a bit at a time until you start to see a fair amount of oil coating the sides of your bowl, like this. And once it's doing this, it's probably best you switch to your hand and start almost kneading it to kind of get the oil out. And as you're kneading, if you tilt the bowl, you'll start to see a pool of oil start to form. And there's a lot more where that came from, so pour it out, save it, and continue this process until you end up with something that looks like this. And once it starts to look like this, there's still a bit more oil in there, so do whatever you can to try and draw out as much oil as possible. I kind of put it in some kitchen towels and tried to wring it out, and then once I couldn't get any more out of that, I kind of put it in between heavy objects to kind of press the oil out. And yeah, just try whatever you can to try and remove as much oil as possible. The more oil you're able to take out, the better your final product will be. Once you've taken out as much oil as possible, season the mixture. I seasoned mine with ginger, salt, sugar, and cayenne pepper. Then mold it into shapes of your choosing. I just went for flat discs, just because this is going to get smashed up anyway, and these just are pretty easy to mold. And you can fry or bake these. I baked mine at 190 degrees Celsius for about 14 to 18 minutes. And yeah, take it out, let it cool, and you have Kuli Kuli. This is really good. Also, a quick side note, I've done some recipe testing for the Kuli Kuli and also for the suya recipe. They should be the shorts on this channel, and there's also my Instagram or TikTok for some more behind the scenes sort of stuff. Okay, so now that the peanuts are down, time for the rest of the spices, and they are ginger, smoked paprika, onion powder, garlic powder, ground cloves, salt, cayenne pepper, Cuba pepper, grains of psyllium, MSG or chicken powder, or a stock cube, Maggi, whatever you want to call it. And before we move on, there's just a few things I need to say about some of the spices. So for the ginger, if you're using Kuli Kuli, it's a 1-to-1 ratio of ginger to Kuli Kuli. It should be a 1-to-1 ratio. I don't really follow it, but it's so if you're using 10 grams ginger, I'll usually add 14 grams Kuli Kuli. And for the roasted peanut, if you're just using roasted peanuts and you're blending it with the spice mix, it's a 3-to-1 ratio or a 4-to-1 ratio. Kind of play around with that to suit your own taste buds of peanut to ginger. Make sense? And lastly, for the Cuba pepper and the grains of psyllium, whilst these do help us own in on that signature suya flavor and add more depth and enhance the flavor profile, they are quite hard to get, understandably, depending on where you are. So good substitutes for them are just black pepper and white pepper. So add some black pepper, add some white pepper, and you should be good to go. Also, the one key thing I want you to take away from this video is more so the spice mix than the actual recipe itself. It's just more so here's a really cool spice mix. You can use it in other applications of your cooking. Here's one cool thing I'm using it to make. You can kind of just use it to make a bunch of other different cool things. You can chuck it on some vegetables, even add it into your curries. But yeah, just you can do a bunch of different things with it, completely your freedom. So yeah, that's kind of the main takeaway I want you to get from this video. Is the spice mix. And next up is the meat. I chose ribeye just because it has a nice amount of marbling and fat is flavor, but feel free to use whatever cut or meat you want to use, such as flank steak, sirloin. Those are pretty good options as well. But yeah, again, you're free to do whatever you want. I just went for ribeye. And before I added the spice mix, I've done a couple things to the steak. First up is the dry brine. I added salt to both sides and left that for about 2 to 3 hours. This is going to increase the flavor of our meat and also just make it more juicy when we're eating it. After this, about 30 minutes before you're ready to start cutting it and using it, stick it into the freezer just so it's slightly firmer and easier to cut. And I've made diagonal cuts against the grain just because this is going to create shorter fibers, which is going to make it easier to chew and also more tender. Side note, if you're using skewers, now is the perfect time to soak them in some water so they don't burn when cooking. Now we're ready to season. Mix the amount of spice mix that you're happy to use with some oil. I'm using the peanut oil we saved earlier from making the Kuli Kuli to create a wet marinade. Also, if you intended on using all of your spice mix, make sure to leave a bit just to sprinkle on at the end for that extra dose of flavor. Anyway, pour that over your meat and give everything a good rub together. I wanted to make surf and turf style suya skewers, so I've also added prawns into the mix and I've also chopped up and prepared some vegetables to add onto them. Into a preheated oven on about 190 to 200 degrees Celsius, add your skewers and cook for 7 minutes, turning halfway. And then towards the end of the cooking process, turn on the broiler just to get a nice char across everything. I don't know, I think it's kind of nice. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is plate 1. And I'm not sure if you guys can see that. Plate 2. It's juicy, the right amount of spiciness, that signature suya flavor coming through. Absolute bliss. Yes. And that's really it for this video. If you have watched up to this far, thank you so much. Again, if you want to see some recipe testing, some behind the scenes, other recipes I'm working on, you can check out these shorts on this channel or go ahead and check out my Instagram or TikTok. Also, if you are interested in some of the research that was done for this video, links are also down in the description below. Thank you so much. Peace.
C'est pourquoi mon cœur chante comme parce que c'est toi que j'ai choisi.